Hey everybody, this is Kat,
And this is Rachel.
and you're listening to the Smut Peddlers podcast, a show for people who love books, especially when there's smut. We discuss our likes, our dislikes, and share all of our favorite moments with you.
Today we're talking about The Au Pair Affair by Tessa Bailey, so grab your favorite beverage and get ready to burn with us. Before we get started, we do want to let you know about some trigger warnings that we thought that you should be aware of from the book, since we will be discussing the plot and characters in detail. For this book, there is stalking, kidnapping, and false imprisonment. They are all descriptions from past experiences. Nothing is happening in real time on the page.
So this book is adult. It is sports romance, contemporary romance, and hockey romance. It is a genre that I have not really dove in too much, but I was very excited to start reading some more sport romance-based books. The Au Pair Affair is the second book in the Big Shot series by Tessa Bailey. This book is considered an interconnected standalone, which means you would not necessarily need to read the first book to follow the second book. That being said, both myself and Rachel have read the first book, which is Fangirl Down, which was golfing-based. In the Au Pair Affair, our male main character is Burgess. He's 37. He's a burly hockey player and a single dad of a 12-year-old daughter, Lissa. Our female main character is Tallulah. She's 26. She's a marine biologist that returned back to Boston for grad school after her time in Antarctica doing field research. Burgess offers Tallulah a job while she attends grad school as Lissa's au pair, and with that, a place to live in his luxury apartment, which she originally agrees to, but then gets cold feet.
So you and I actually rated this book differently.
Yes.
Which is not necessarily super rare, but we disagree on the pepper rating,
Yes.
which I think might be a first.
Uh-huh.
Even though this is only our second episode, but we've been reading books for a lot longer than that.
We rate books to each other. We've been rating books to each other for quite some time.
for a while, and we settled on our pepper rating together at least a year ago now. Mm-hmm. So I rated it a 4. I gave the book in total 4 stars, and then I gave it a 4 in spice rating, which for us usually means kinks.
Mm-hmm.
And you rated it.
I gave the book 3.5 stars, and I gave it 3 pepper rating,
which means no kinks.
Yeah.
He puts his finger in her mouth.
Okay.
That's at least a little bit kinky. And then also at one point, someone tells somebody to spit on it, okay? Like, I'm sorry. Put 2 in, 1 plus 1 equals 2, all right? If you have 1, I'll let it slide. If you have the other, I'll let it slide. You put 2 together in separate instances throughout the book, going for a 4. It can be a soft 4, but it's not a 3.
I would say it's definitely, if that's the case, a soft 4. I still would not have put that into the kink category.
Okay.
I
feel like I want to try to find more stuff.
More of... The thing that was teetering me on the edge of putting it into the 4 category wasn't even those 2 scenarios. It was...
Those are the first 2 that came to mind.
Her telling him to hurt her.
See, and that too. Like, again, I feel like I rated it a 4 and then forgot all of the things. That one was also...
So I originally put 3.5
they also, like,
because, like, I would say it goes into it, but there's really no, like...
Yeah.
Explicit
There's a little
kink.
bit of, like, almost exhibitionist in there, though, right? Yeah. To me, it's like, it definitely wasn't one specific scene that I said, oh, it is a 4. Like, that's gonna make it a 4. I ended up at the end of the book, and I felt like there was just too many... Not too many. Not enough. But there were enough that I was like, I think this feels like a 4 to me. Because the other reason is when I think of a 3, I don't know.
See,
it's so on the line.
I think 3 is explicit detail in sex scenes.
Yeah.
Which, to me, those were explicit details within sex scenes. There was no, like, introduction of specific things where a safe word was involved.
Yeah, that's true. I'm still gonna give it a 4, but it is a soft 4.
That's fair.
But I hate 0.5s. I will never judge you for giving things 0.5, but they make me angry.
I would say
I can't do it. It's
I
getting a
couldn't
4.
give this book, like, I couldn't give for the star ratings. I couldn't give this a 3-star, and I couldn't give it a 4-star.
I think that in general, I end up erring on, for the spice ratings, I end up erring on the side of rating high. Because I think that for the people that we know that would be okay reading something that's explicit, would be uncomfortable with the spit on it and the hurt me stuff, or wanting it to hurt, which is fine. I think that's why in general I usually rate high, because then if someone's like, you know what? We'll call this a gateway drug book. If you are looking to get into maybe what might be considered into dark romance or into darker, kinkier things, read this one. This is a good place to start. It might not necessarily be a 3. Yeah, it's good. If you read that and you're like, this might be a bit much for me, really just stick to those 3s or 2s, maybe. Maybe go back down to a 2. It's so interesting to have that conversation too, because it's, it's very much what people would consider maybe even more vanilla. Like, they're not overly kinky things, but I also wouldn't call them vanilla things either.
No.
So, there's also a door frame scene.
We love a door frame.
We got a door frame scene, which is...
Our gateway drug was a door frame scene in Hook, Line, and Sinker. So
door frames! I will give good reviews to any book that puts a door frame scene. We had a lot of really good... We had quite a few trope things in this one. You get a good girl. You get the door frame. I'm trying to think, there's
bodyguard,
big like protector energy. There isn't
touch her and I'll kill you kind of vibes.
Oh, so much of that. Didn't get the actual words, but it's as close as you could get to not saying them. Happens in this book for sure. So yeah, I mean, we can go through the plot some. I found that as I was making notes for this book, that I was trying to figure out, like, okay, what's important to, like, mention so that it can set up what we're going to talk about later. And then I realized how complex the plot of this story was.
Yeah, there was a lot going on.
It feels like I couldn't leave anything out. Like, we talk about her trauma, and we talk about what's going on with his daughter, and then his friends that are getting married that you have to set up to talk about the other stuff that happens later in the book. So there's a lot in the plot outline, and we're going to just get through it, kind of as we go, and we're going to try to go in the order of the book. So when we finished the synopsis, we talked about that she accepts this position with Burgess as an au pair, and then she gets cold feet. And it's very clear in the beginning of the book that she's getting cold feet because of some sort of past trauma that's not mentioned. And they kind of tiptoe around it. And she's just really regretting her decision at the beginning of the book, because she talks about how she made the decision saying, I wanted to be adventurous, and I wanted to try to, like, push past the things that have happened in my life and do this thing. And then she's like, I'm going to be alone in a house with a man that I don't know and don't know anything about. And it's just like, nope, I'm not comfortable. And Burgess comes into this, and they meet up, like, at a coffee shop, and she's completely prepared to turn him down and say, nope, I can't do it. And he comes in with his, like, big bear protector energy and is like, I need her to feel safe. I can't help it. And just tries to steer the conversation in a direction of, like, what can I do to make her feel safe? And the first thing that he does that made me be like, oh, I love him, was he's like, I'll put a lock on your door. Like, if you want a lock on your door, I'll put a lock on your door. I don't care. That's fine. If that's what you need to feel safe, great. And she's still just, like, very wishy-washy about it. So this man goes and tries to solve the situation by saying, okay, that's fine. Like, if you can't take the position, that's cool. But, like, at least let me help you find somewhere to stay.
That's
so that
safe.
we can, so that you can still feel safe and that I can feel like I am not putting you in a position, because he feels responsible for her not being comfortable taking the position. So now she's like kind of out here in the lurch. And she tells him her budget, which is not a lot and not going to get her someplace safe in Boston, which is where our story is taking place. So he finds his friend, calls his friend, and is like, "Hey, where's your stepsister staying?" Good old, is it Sig?
Sig, yeah.
Sig, and his stepsister Chloe. Oh, what a storyline they have through this book.
Oh yeah.
Which we'll get to. So he basically calls up his teammate and is like, "Hey, can this person that I know stay with your sister?" And he's like, "Sure. Like, here's how much the rent is." And he goes, "Yeah, her budget's like $700. I will cover the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't tell her." So she like goes and meets Chloe, and Chloe is like adorable and we love her, but like not on the same page about what she's supposed to be explaining and what she's not supposed to be explaining to our girl. So just lets the cat out of the bag pretty freaking quick that Burgess has set all of this up to try to make her feel safe and comfortable, and that he's planning to pay the rest of her rent. And she's like, "No." What? No. She's pissed. Which, because, you know, justifiably, it feels a little controlling. Especially from an outsider's perspective, like hers. So she immediately is like, "Nope. I'm going straight over to his place and, like, confronting him about this." And that's the first time that we really get a conversation with him and his daughter.
Yeah.
It's like one of the first little family scenes we get.
Yeah, so in this scene, she shows up, and prior to her arriving, Burgess is trying to get his daughter ready for school. And part of that is attempting to put a French braid in her hair. And she is, as a 12-year-old, having a meltdown about her hair. She wants to be included with the rest of her volleyball team, who all has braids, whenever they compete or do anything. And so Burgess is watching YouTube videos trying to learn how to put a braid in his daughter's hair. And unfortunately, it's his first time doing a braid. And as anyone knows who has done a French braid before, it is not the easiest thing to do on your first try. And so
I can't do one. I'm a full-grown adult. I cannot do one. The amount of times that I have had you specifically French braid my hair, because I literally can't do it, is... So Burgess, I get it. I was a
gymnast, so we French braided each other's hair every competition.
You're so good at it. My hair comes out so good every time you do it.
I can French braid other people's hair. I cannot French braid my own. It comes out as a Dutch braid, which, if you know the difference, is it means I do the exact same motion of a French braid onto someone else's head, onto my own, which reverses it, and so it sticks out instead of like lying flat, which... whatever.
I barely ever know the difference. I think I only knew the difference when I asked you to French braid my hair, and then you explained to me what the difference was. I was like, I didn't know that was the thing.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know why. I did gymnastics for like a majority of my life, so we always braided each other's hair. But I felt her because I've had like my mom braid my hair as a kid and then try to like finagle it to like make it look more aesthetically appealing, like all the cool girls. And so having that like, oh well, it's loose in this spot or it's falling out here, and like having that like internal mental breakdown of like, oh my god, this is so embarrassing, like they're gonna just make fun of me, like I'd rather just take it out. And so that in this scene she just like there's a scene where she's like clawing at her hair to like remove the braid. And so
she basically like comes out of the bathroom and it's like completely undone because he did his best try, and it just wasn't like good enough. It wasn't like that perfect French braid that she's looking for, especially at that young of an age. Yeah. So but Tallulah arrives and walks in the door as this scene is taking place. He's trying to braid her hair, and Lissa, of course, gets very excited and
She asks her if she can braid her hair, and she does it in like seconds. Like she, in mid conversation, throws a braid in her hair real quick, and it's perfect, of course, because she's probably done it a million times. And then Lissa runs off to school. One of my favorite things about this scene was you get multiple different dynamics. You get the dynamic of Burgess trying to be a good single dad, trying to learn a new thing for his daughter. You get the daughter who is trying to explain why this is so important to him, and he doesn't truly understand because he has never been a 12-year-old girl. And then you get Tallulah and Burgess's interaction together once Lissa leaves. This is one of the first scenes that Tallulah is left alone with Burgess in a one-on-one scenario. And in that scenario, he doesn't fully know that something happened, that she had some past trauma. He had a feeling from their original conversation that something occurred, but there was nothing outright spoken. But he realized that her body language was uncomfortable in his apartment alone. And so he immediately goes and pivots, notices that she's uncomfortable, and says something along the lines of, "Oh, it's about that time that I go down to the smoothie shop and grab a smoothie. You want to come?" As a way to get them out of that location, to make her feel more comfortable. This is like a part of him, and he does this on many occasions throughout the book, where they're one-on-one before they truly have had conversations about her trauma or her really opening up, where he realizes that she's uncomfortable and he will do something to like make her more comfortable without outwardly saying that's what he's doing.
Yeah, so during the scene, one of the things that he says is, "I'm just going to come right out and say something to Tallulah because I feel like it needs to be said. I've never laid a hand on a woman in my fucking life, and I never will." Mm-hmm. And she just is like, she doesn't know how to respond. And she's also like pretty nervous that he's like able to pick up on the fact that something was wrong and that something was bothering her. And he's just like, "I'm just going to put this to bed like right here because I can tell that she's uncomfortable. And I'm just going to, like, I can't have her thinking that this is... that if she's uncomfortable due to me, like, I'm just going to put that worry to bed the best that I can." Which I thought was so sweet.
Yeah, I put a few notes down that kind of overall, the book I thought was really good for a lot of those aspects. I also really enjoyed the relationship building between Burgess and Lissa the whole time. So like in that starting scene, you get kind of a taste that they don't necessarily see eye to eye, but she's also a 12-year-old girl and he's a hockey player.
Like he's not good at like relating to his daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're also, he's divorced. So his wife, they have like ex-wife, they have shared custody of their daughter. And he has been trying to relate to her a little bit more, understand her a little bit better, and just isn't doing well. And this scene is also the scene where Tallulah also realizes, like, hey, they might actually need me more than I thought. It's not just, cut and dry taking care of the kid. Like, he could really use the help relating to his daughter and, like, getting that girl talk, like, diagnosis post what am I trying to say? Like post-game feedback. After these interactions that he's having with his daughter, and she does that like throughout the book too, which I think is so lovely. She doesn't just say like, "This is where you went wrong," and like acknowledge that something went wrong, but then tells him like, "You should try this next time," or "This is how you can relate to her. This is why she's upset about X, Y, and Z thing," which I thought was so great. And it's like having this interaction, and this whole scene ends up being one of the reasons why she agrees to dinner with Burgess and with Lissa to just kind of he wants to try to make her feel more comfortable, so he invites her to dinner. And they're gonna kind of see if things feel a little bit better. And at dinner is where we learn about what she's gone through. Yeah. So this is where our trigger warnings come into play. She pretty detailed explains basically everything that happened to her that is the trauma behind why she doesn't trust men. And it's basically that there was a guy that she was friends with when they were younger, and they were kind of all, flirty, and you're not really making any commitments when you're younger in school. And then she kind of goes off to college, and he stalks her. And then eventually finds her, kidnaps her, and holds her hostage for 2 days. And they talk about this. She talks about it in pretty detailed. She talks about like how it was to be in that situation and not know if she was going to live or figure out how to get out. And then she also talks about how she escaped and that she was able to get out because she took the opportunity when he opened the door and hit him over the head with like a plank of wood and just ran out of there.
Yeah.
And the whole time she's telling the story, she's like really nervous about it. And like the thing that Burgess says like immediately when she's done is like, "You're so brave." And she just didn't know how to deal with that because she does not feel brave. She does not feel like she is strong. And he looks at the situation and goes, "You are alive. You escaped. Like you got yourself out." And he's just stunned with her. And I think that whole conversation is exactly what she needed for her to feel safe to accept the position. And she kind of accepts the position without saying that she's accepting the position. And he's like, "Wait, are you actually gonna like take the job?" And she's like, "Can you have a lock on my door by tomorrow?" Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Yup, good to go.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, I can do that." So she accepts the position with him. And she basically like decides to move in, and they kind of go off and do their own thing.
One of my favorite lines during their conversation of her pretty much downloading her trauma to him was that he pretty much said that I'm not as big a person as you, apparently, because right now I'd like to shake the hand of his killer, because the person that did this to her went to prison and then
got killed in prison.
Yeah. Pretty much murdered in prison. And then later on she replies, "I won't let him put an ounce of hate in my body. He's already put enough fear." But she gave a jerky shrug. "It's nice to have someone angry for me. I don't feel like talking you out of it." Which was like a nice ode to his protective nature, and it also kind of leans on how she has been dealing with the situation. Is she doesn't want her trauma to be the only thing that she is anymore, and she's really working to like move past it as a thing that had occurred in her life.
And he says that pretty much later in the conversation. He says, "For what it's worth, Tallulah, you won. You waited for your moment, you kicked his ass, and you got as far away as you could. And you didn't let him make you bitter. That's better than I could have done."
Yeah.
And I love that. It's the fact that he does, "And you didn't let him make you bitter." Like, she is struggling, but she still, like, one of the things that she goes and does while dealing with her trauma is like goes to Antarctica. And she says in the book how it's like, yeah, that sounds like an adventurous thing that I went to go do, but it was really because like I could go sequester myself away from people for a really long time. But you still like left. Like you went and continued to live your life, even though you lived it in a very specific way so that you would be comfortable. You didn't just shut down and like not do anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so now at this point she's moved in. She is in his house, which he's like, "This is great," and then walks in the door coming home from hockey practice, and it's like, oh, this might be a problem, because this girl is dressed, ready to go out to the club, like very tight black skirt, stockings, super hot. Love it. And she is bent over the kitchen table helping Lissa with her homework.
Yeah.
Not having heard that Burgess has come in the door, and he just gets like basically like a full view of just like her ass. And she like was helping her with something, like leans over more, gets even more of a view of her ass. He's like, oh no, this is not okay. I gotta, like, goes back outside really quietly, and then very loudly comes back in the apartment, shuts the door, and is like, I'm home, here I am. And one of my favorite lines in this book comes from this scene. It just says, that leather had been licked onto her by the devil. So good. And then he gets immediately, like, really awkward having this conversation with her about being like, what are you dressed for? Like, where are you going out?
What's
You're
happening?
going out. That's cool. And she's like, yep, I need my key so that I can go out. I'm going out. And he's like, it's on the door, the one with the pepper spray attached, which was so cute. And then he's like, oh, might have overstepped. So let's tone it back by saying what I think might be the most awkward thing he says in the whole book. I would want my daughter to carry pepper spray.
I just liked his internal dialogue. After that, I'd be like, way to go, buddy.
He goes, why? Why did he say that? It makes him sound old enough to be her father, which thank fuck he wasn't.
Yep. Oh, God.
This does bring up one of the tropes, which is they have an 11-year age difference, which is, I would definitely consider, an age gap. But I really didn't, like, they don't have a maturity gap, which I think is why it didn't bother me at all throughout the book.
Yeah. She's in grad school, so
Yep.
she is already used to being around people of that age group anyway. Like, people that are in grad school range anywhere from, like, 25 to, like, 40. Like,
yeah.
So,
but she is still the age where, like, she's going out to go to a club tonight.
Yes.
And he's at home with his daughter, and he's, you know, kind of an older hockey player. He's definitely getting towards the end of his career, which they mention, like, in the book, that he's had a lot of, he hasn't really had any big injuries yet, but his body's breaking down. Like, he's got some back pain and muscle pain, and he's getting very nervous that it's starting to be, like, that time where he's going to need to look to retire. So he feels old, even though I wouldn't consider him old either.
37 is not old.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, he's divorced and has a kid. So just right out of the gate, he's like, oh, I'm way too old for her.
Yeah.
And I just think that it didn't really bother me throughout the book. I don't usually like age gaps, especially in contemporary. Age gaps can be real weird. We don't count 500-year-old females when we talk about fantasy. We don't think about those. It's fine.
Yeah, a 19-year-old and a 500-year-old is definitely fine.
That's not problematic at all. But it's fantasy, so they get away with it.
It's not
they
real.
Can just do whatever they want.
It's because it's not real. So, like, in your brain, you're like, it's fine because it's not real.
They have wings, okay? That's what we're gonna.
My biggest thing is that, like, there's a difference if you're, like, an undergrad and dating someone who has graduated and has, like,
this is what I'm saying, the maturity thing for me.
Yeah.
Is like,
they're at similar points mentally in their life and, like, what they want out of life.
Yep.
I would say he definitely is more, like, settled down, and she is, like, tipping into that.
Yeah, and in the beginning of the book especially, she does not want to settle down. Like, she does not. She's trying to figure her own shit out.
Yeah.
She's like, I want to come out of my box and remember who I am and not feel scared all the time. And she's pretty clear in the beginning of the book too that she's like, she definitely doesn't want to do that just because she has someone protecting her. Which I think is, I mean, that to me, like, I very much related to that because my husband and I have been together for a very, very long time. We were high school sweethearts, which is gross. But I love him very much, I promise. But one of the things that I really wanted to do when we were still dating was live on my own and my husband was in the military and stationed overseas, so I had like a full year and a half where I lived on my own, even though I was in a relationship. But like that was important to me to feel like I could do that, and if anything, God forbid, were to happen to him or happen to us in our relationship, I did it once before, so I would have the confidence that I would know that I can go and survive on my own and support myself and not be reliant on another person. So like I loved that she was still very, I need to figure myself out and get my shit together before I even think about whether I'm going to want to be with someone else. And like that's her only priority. And he also knows that throughout most of the book too, is like he's not trying to come on to her and be like, "Oh no, I'll fix everything for you."
Yeah.
He mentions a couple times in the book too that he's like, "I want you to not need me."
Yeah.
By the time that like this is done or whatever we're doing, like whatever, whether you're, you know, just doing it while you're my au pair and then you'll go move on. Like he wants her to be self-sufficient.
Yeah, there's a point in the book where she talks about wanting to go on all these adventures and saying that she's like scared to do that kind of on her own, and he offers her a slight out of like, what if I go with you and I can be like your bodyguard, so like no one really bothers you, you can just do your thing. One of my favorite scenes in when they're at the club is this is the first time she is like actually physically hanging out with Chloe, and like girl code to the max. Chloe goes off to get a drink, to get refills. And this was a thing that I like read out loud to my partner of like, this right here. Like this is what girls do when like they are friends and like care about each other.
Oh, I know what you're getting at.
It just is what they do. So Chloe goes off. Tallulah's by herself with Finn. Finn is the male character that she is partnered with in school. He's been kind of coming on to her, but she's been like, I don't know if he's just being nice. I don't know if he's actually coming on to me. Like, I can't really read the scenario. They're just having a conversation. He pretty much says like, oh, what part of town are you going to after this? And she says where she lives, sort of like the area. And he goes, oh, I'm headed that way too. You want to split a cab? And in this scenario, like if you're friendly with people at school, like that's not really that big of a deal. It seemed like in her mind, she's like, he could just be being nice. He could be like trying to go home with me. I don't really know. And so she kind of didn't want to make a scene. So she said, maybe, yeah, sure. Finn's smile widened. This is when Chloe comes back. She comes back holding the drink. She says, one amaretto sour for the lady, Chloe sang, coming up on Tallulah's right, pressing a cold drink into her hand. The blonde's gaze bounced between Tallulah and Finn, lighting up with interest, and she leaned in close to speak near Tallulah's ear. Should I make myself scarce? Tallulah responds, no. Gotcha. Should he? Yeah, I think so. But she's saying it in like a, I'm not really sure. And then Chloe just goes, double gotcha. Chloe hooked her arm through Tallulah's and stuck her bottom lip out at Finn. Sorry, babe, I'm stealing her for drunk girl talk. It's the best kind, Tallulah tacked on with a tight smile, grateful when Chloe steered her toward the bar. Thanks. He wasn't being excessively creepy or anything. I'm just... You don't have to explain, it's just no. That line by itself, I think is so important and such a wonderful thing for Tessa to put in this. Especially between two female characters and one who already like has trauma, specifically with men.
She has no, like, Chloe has no idea that she has this trauma either. And the thing that I agree that I liked so much about it is that we can talk about statistics all we want. Almost all of us have trauma. So it's not, you don't even have, that's not even like, oh, they're like that because something happened to them. It's because all of us have had something happen to us. And I think that it's so nice, again, because we've all had to do it too, where we've been the strong one in a situation. and had to say, like, nope, you actually don't need to explain yourself. You just say you don't want to, or that you weren't into it, and then it just stops. Like, that's the point. And then we've all been in a situation as well where we've questioned ourselves of like, I don't know, maybe I could have done more. It's like, no, if you had said that to any other person, like, those words would not come out of your mouth. They would not.
Yeah.
But it's like, we just don't treat ourselves the way that we treat other people. And I think it's more validation for her, like, right when she needs it. And from Chloe, who's like so bubbly and so like,
will talk to anyone.
I don't want to call her ditzy because she's not, but she does, like, her character is like flighty-esque.
Yeah. She'll talk to anyone. She'll have a good time. Like, she's down for anything. Like, she's the person in the book that is like, oh, you want to go to the club? Yeah, I'd love to go with you. Like, oh, I'll go get drinks. Like, oh, let's do this. Let's dance. Like, the two, like, part of the story of them in the club is like all of her, like, grad students are kind of off sitting at a table, and her and Chloe are just out dancing and having like a great time. So she's a very outgoing character. She's very I would definitely say she's bubbly. I wouldn't necessarily say she's like flighty or airheady, but she is just like very outgoing. And so she'll talk to anyone. She's kind of the person that picks up on, like, she seems to pick up on vibes, and she's like, all right, let's do this thing. Oh, like, she gave her an out. Even if, like, all she had to say was like, yeah, maybe. Like, maybe I want to get out of this situation. And Chloe was like, on it. Done. We're out of this situation. Which was wonderful. I don't know. I just really enjoyed that little dynamic. And it was a nice little addition for two female characters, when a lot of time we play, what is it? The Bechdel test of...
The Bechdel test.
Technically,
this doesn't pass the Bechdel test either, but it's about safety more than anything else, which I love. And it's about their comfort, which is the best, because she just goes, no, you don't actually have to explain yourself. We can just leave.
But the thing is, like,
we can just literally not go.
Like, that was the conversation, and then they moved on and went and talked about other things. Like, it ended at that. She pretty much says, you don't have to explain, it's just a no. And she agrees, you're right, I don't have to explain. And then they make a little joke about it, and they just start chatting to each other. And they, like, move on from the conversation, which I think is great as well. But they do end up talking about Sig, and they end up talking about Burgess. And this is
Sig
like
shows up too.
Yeah, this is the first scenario
Sig
where
shows
she
up.
like openly communicates that she's attracted to Burgess. And then end of the night, closing out, bar is shutting down, everything's kind of closing down. Last call situation. Sig shows up to collect Chloe. Chloe didn't know he was showing up. He obviously was just playing the, like, protective.
Chloe also calls him one of my other favorite lines in the book.
Mm-hmm.
She said, Tallulah agrees. She basically is saying that, like, Burgess is hot, and Tallulah agrees with her. Chloe says, in, like, a mean daddy way. Tallulah just goes, I know and no, not that it matters. I work for him. She goes, I know, but, like, why does that make it hotter? So good. Chloe, you're a terrible influence. It's so good.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, and he
it's
shows
the
up.
Vodka.
It's the vodka. Oh, God, that is the next line. Yeah, so they're wrapping up for the night, and they end up going to... Burgess comes to pick her up and is like, what's going on? Like, is very protective and immediately, like, slides in kind of right behind her, grabbing her and making sure, because she's also, like, a little drunk, so she's stumbling a little bit, and is just basically doing his protectorness and making sure that she's going to be able to get to the car safely and okay. And he basically gets her back to the car, and she sees, like, Finn coming out of the bar, and she just says, she basically tells him, like, I did an impulsive thing. I told him my boyfriend was coming to pick me up. He's gonna think that's you. Could you maybe be convincing? Burgess's whole body was beginning to thrum. Convincing how? Could you kiss me one time? I'll never ask again. And he just immediately is like, don't have to ask me twice, girl. I'm on it. Immediately kisses her. And it's not cute. It's not a peck. He's just like, cool, great. Gonna have one chance at this. Going for it. I am in. And they get very hot and bothered about it. And he immediately apologizes, too. Because he is like, I got carried away. I'm so sorry. She's like, nope, I asked you to kiss me. He's like, yep, but I went a little further than kissing, and you've been drinking. So he
felt very regretful. He felt like he was taking advantage of her in that scenario.
Advantage of the situation for sure.
That he was like reading the cues incorrectly or whatever. And so, yeah, in that moment, he is just like spewing apology after apology after apology. And at some point, Tallulah is drunk and she's just like, God, you're so intense. Like,
which is so, have you ever made small talk in your life? And his response is, about what? That's the thing about small talk. It's not about anything. It's small. He says, what's the goddamn point?
Yeah.
He's so funny. Oh, God. It's just, he's almost like more man. He reminds me of Steven and of Jared. Of like, what's the goddamn point of small talk is definitely something where I'm like, what's the point of this conversation? That's something that probably plays in Steven's mind all the time when he's listening.
Literally anytime I'm like telling Jared anything and he's like, you just jumped from like 7 different topics.
Do they have this like glazed face that they make where they're just like, you can tell they're listening and they're like, one day she will get to the point, probably, maybe eventually.
I definitely get the like, hold shoulders, where he's like,
it's the lean forward. That's what it is.
We started talking about what we're gonna have for dinner. Why are we talking about the laundry now? Can we get back to what we're gonna eat for dinner? Because I need food if we're gonna have this conversation.
Especially if we're gonna keep having this conversation. I need food.
Mm-hmm.
So they end up like, they get in the car and they're like, okay, it's time to go home. And they have the conversation about failed small talk, and they're just being awkward. They're like talking about dating. No, we're not talking about dating. They're talking about kissing. No, we're not talking about kissing, because everything is just not helping their situation.
Too
touchy. He goes, dating? Who said anything about dating? Oh, I see. No beating around the bush there. Oh, I see. No beating around the bush there either, so to speak. Just straight to the main event. If you're implying I don't know how to make a woman wet, I'd be happy to disprove your theory, gorgeous. I only need one hand to drive this car.
I read that sitting next to Jared. I looked at him, I went, oh, okay.
I read it, and then I reread it, and then I put 2 tabs next to it. Not just one. I put 2, because I was like, God damn. Oh
yeah,
God.
This was a highlight, and then I looked at Jared, and I read it to him, and he even, like, got a smirk on his face, and I was like, tee hee.
I only need one hand to drive this car. God, okay.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Sounds great.
Of course.
Awesome.
Which she rejects because she's the smartest person on the planet.
Uh-huh.
Terrible decisions are made. And then, so this is how they get onto the conversation of being her bodyguard. So she wants to go out and do these adventurous things, and she doesn't feel comfortable doing them. So he, was like, oh, how can I spend more time with her? I'll offer to do the things with her. One of which she mentions is skinny dipping, which he then again immediately regrets offering to do with her, because now he has to go and protect her while she's doing skinny dipping. with another great like inner dialogue of his. He goes, it's like inner dialogue in his head. Don't look at her thighs. Distract yourself with something. Anything. Burgess cleared his throat hard. So skinny dipping, huh? Perfect, man. Nailed it. Now he was sinking over naked.
I had that highlighted
just
as well.
So smart and so dumb at the same time, and it's so cute.
One that I really liked, so later on, she notices that he's in a lot of pain, so she comes up behind him and, like, starts massaging him. This is, like, their first...
Yeah, from hockey.
After
he's like...
the kiss, this is their first, like, physical touch scenario that happens. And in her, like, internal dialogue, she pretty much says, the inked skin, thick butt, muscle trifecta was really bringing home the fact that she was not simply working for a single father, she was working for a snack, a dilf, a big boy. That, I was just like, oh.
Yep.
Yes.
I have that one highlighted as well. And I also read that, and I was like, Kat's gonna love that line.
I love a big boy.
A big boy. Because of course you have to say it like that. I listened to the audiobook as well, and she says it like that as well. I was like, way to go. Mm-hmm. Let's go.
Immediately in my brain, I was singing, I need a big boy. I need a big boy.
That's copyright. You can't sing that. Stop that. Yeah, his back injury. So they end up basically having two deals. One of which is he's her bodyguard for her going out and, like, doing the things that she wants to do when she's nervous to do them alone. And he so cleverly tricks her into giving him massages on a regular basis. Because he basically is getting this massage from her, and she's like, I'll give you a massage every night if you go and see a doctor. And she's like, done. Wait, what? Hold on. Why does it feel like I just got maneuvered? And he's like, I'll make the appointment tomorrow. We're good to go. Massages every night. A-okay? Sick.
Awesome. Thanks.
And it happens multiple times. She, like, tricks him. They, like, trick each other into doing the things that they want each other to do. Because she uses it against him later to get him to talk to his team doctors about his, like, muscle strain that he has. Mm-hmm. And they play off each other so well. And, like, during this time is also when she's, like, really helping him connect with his daughter more. And, like, again, just explaining to him, like, what he's doing wrong. Like, in detail. Mm-hmm. Not just being like, you didn't handle that well, but, like, here's why, and this is what you can do to make it better.
Yeah, one of the first, like, real scenes that this is played out is she is cooking dinner. Like, her plan is to cook dinner, and she pretty much is like, hey, you're gonna chop these onions. And she tells him to, like, do a job. And then Lissa is like, wait, can I help too? And so then the three of them are cooking together. And then later there's this whole, like, running joke between the two of them where she's like, I'm not cooking dinner. Like, that's not my thing that I'm doing. Like, that's not my job. And so then he comes home from, like, practice on multiple times, and she made dinner, and she was just like, well, I was making it anyway. Like, and he's like, yeah, sure. And so there are, like, multiple scenes like that where she makes dinner, he comes home, there's food, and then there's another note where he talks about, because they were cooking together, she was teaching them how to cook, and he was able to later on then cook while she was studying a bunch. So it was just a nice little kind of tie back to all of that.
I love when they cook together. And I love that she wants to be involved with Tallulah and helping around the house. And there's so many cute scenes with Lissa, especially once he realizes that, like, Tallulah explicitly says, like, she hangs on your every word.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she wants that reassurance from you. So when you, like, not necessarily brush it off, but don't, like, respond in a way that makes her feel like you're interested, it crushes her. And I think that that's the main thing that really helps them in their relationship, which I love. And, like, Tallulah does that for them. Mm-hmm. Like, he, like, mentions multiple times that she has changed so much of his life and also his daughter's life at the same time. And I just think it's so sweet and heartwarming. And she, like, really confides in Tallulah. And confides in her, like, a couple of times that she's very hopeful that her parents are going to get back together. And even though the mom is literally engaged to someone else, like, she is someone's fiance, and her daughter is still just, like, wants them to get back together. And Tallulah mentions it to Burgess, like, a couple of times, and he just doesn't, like, act on it fast enough. So they're going, like, through this whole relationship and trying to figure out, like, what they're doing with each other. And Tallulah, kind of in the back of her mind the whole time, is like, Lissa's gonna be, like, crushed. Because, like, they both know that that's not a thing that's gonna happen. Mm-hmm. Like, again, his ex-wife is literally engaged to someone else.
Yes.
But that's a conversation that he needs to have with her and not Tallulah. Which causes some problems, for sure. Because as the story progresses, like, they end up together. Like, they get together and aren't really being public about it, but, like, Lissa finds out.
Yeah.
And she's furious, and she's so heartbroken. And she blames Tallulah and, like, feels betrayed by their friendship, and it was so sad. That was a mean third act breakup, Tessa Bailey. It was mean because you didn't just make me sad for Burgess and Tallulah, you made me sad for Lissa. And I love Lissa. That one hurt.
Yeah. There is also there's a few other things that come up around this time, like, just prior to them officially, like, dating. I think one of my favorite things is there's a scene where Burgess calls Whitaker.
Wells
Whitaker, who is
Wells and Josephine from Fangirl Down.
So they're from Fangirl Down. So this is how they kind of tie back together. Wells is Burgess's, like, best guy friend. I don't know. They don't really have friends. So, like, it's their best guy friends. And then Josephine and Tallulah are best girlfriends. And so Burgess calls Wells for advice and pretty much asks, what does it mean that she wants to help me get back to the dating scene? Wells didn't answer for several seconds. You know, you could have led with that. It's kind of the crux of the issue, wouldn't you say? Burgess grunted. I'm out of my depth here, Sir Savage, but I'll tell you one thing I know purely from a standpoint of self-preservation. His friend seemed to be pausing for dramatic effect. Do not actually let her get you back into the dating scene. Do you hear me? If she even has the slightest ounce of interest in you and you go on a date with someone else, it'll sink faster than one of my putts. Referring to golf. Okay, yeah, Burgess slowly started to nod. This is the kind of advice I came for. Good. Glad I could help. Godspeed.
It's like one of the first times in a book where the guy friend has very useful information and is not entirely useless.
Yes.
Like, it's happened a lot more recently in, I think maybe it's just, like, the more recent books that have come out. This has been a theme of, like, oh, there's not a dumb male friend. There is a smart male friend who knows. Like, he seems like he's read a couple of romance books, you know, and knows his way around the dating pool. And Wells is like, I've made all of the mistakes already. We read them in the first book. Don't make the same mistakes I did, buddy. Please.
There's at one point he says, well, the way I did it was I fired her. But don't do that. Don't
Don't do that. That was a terrible idea.
It was very particular to our scenario and had to happen and would not work the same for you. She's like, I am going to reiterate, do not fire her. So one of the things that he attended as her bodyguard was she needed to, after the scenario took place at the club where she was kind of uncomfortable with Finn, didn't really know if that was true or not, whatever. So she had to meet him for a project because they're paired off together for grad school. And so they met at a coffee shop. And Burgess pretty much asked if she wanted him to be there, and he said, like, I can just go sit in the corner. Like, so he shows up, my cat's staring at my hand. He shows up and sits at, like, the very back corner, and so, like, out of sight, out of mind, just hanging out in the shadows kind of situation. During this scenario, Finn, I guess, doesn't realize that he's there. Unsure how. He's massive, as described, and draws everybody's attention. So unsure how Finn was in his own little bubble and didn't recognize that he was there, but didn't recognize he was there. And so he does a couple things where he, like, is coming onto Tallulah a little bit more, and not, like, overtly, but kind of, like, he puts his arm on her chair and, like, leans in on her, where, like, it could be that he's just trying to see something she's working on, but also she kind of took it as, like, a, okay, like, I feel creeped out, like, I would like you to not be doing this. And so there's a point where Finn says all this stuff and starts pretty much talking shit about Burgess and calling him a Neanderthal and just being rude. And so she stands up to him, which is, like, one of her power move moments. It's, like, the first time she's kind of stood up to a man in, like, a more, I guess, aggressive manner, other than just, like, kind of agreeing and then, like, shrugging it off, or, like, being very, like, passive about it. She was very direct, and, like, she pretty much told him to, like, go fuck off.
She calls him a motherfucker or something like that. It's so good. And
then threatens to break his glasses, which I also thought was like funny. So Burgess watches this whole thing, and in this scenario, like, there's a point where he is kind of wrestling with the idea of going and intervening, but at no point did he pretty much said, like, if he touches her, I will. Like, that was his line. But he wanted her to handle the scenario, which she did. She pretty much... So then he comes up to her and be like, what's going on? And so they go home, have the conversation. Are you going to tell me what he said to you in the coffee shop? I don't think I should. So he's like, is it really that bad? Like, what did he say? And he's like, what did he do to her to, like, get her so upset? Like, I'm gonna kill this kid. Like, I don't care what's going on, but he's dead. Like, whatever he did to her, he's dead. And so she pretty much says that, like, well, it was about you. He called you a Neanderthal. And Tallulah whispered, anger cracking in her voice. I told one of our mutual friends I worked for you, and he assumed correctly you were the man I was kissing outside the club, and he called you that. The hot magma that had been flowing in his veins, prepared to erupt over a vile insult toward Tallulah, cooled immediately. Wait, that's it? She spun around in his arms. What do you mean, that's it? I mean, he insulted me, not you? That's what pissed you off enough to call him a motherfucker and threaten to break his glasses? Yes, she scrubbed circles in her chest with her palms. He doesn't even know you. Holy shit, she was really honest to God upset. Tallulah. What? Do you have any idea what kind of names I've been called on the road? Hell, I've been called worse by my own teammates. So, he stroked the side of her face. Neanderthal doesn't even rate gorgeous. Oh yeah? Then why did I want to stab him in the throat? And then in his internal dialogue, he just goes, I'm going to marry this girl someday. I don't know, he said, winded by the vow he'd just made to himself. You tell me. And so in this scenario, it's like the first time that she, like, actually admits to herself that she has real feelings for him.
She has to, because she's so off the handle that she's like, no, shit. wait a second. Like, she gets so angry. And she's like, what do you mean? Why am I angry? It's like, of course I'm pissed because he insulted you. He's like, well, I get it because I know how I feel about you and I would also be pissed, but you're not getting the connection of that's because of how I feel about you, ma'am. So I just, yeah, it's like one of the first things for me where I'm like, Tallulah, are you getting it yet? Do you get it yet? Are you making the connection in your brain?
On.
Please. Come on, get there. The rest of us are there. The rest of us have been there for like 100 pages. Like, catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is so, I don't even think that it's so much that she's slow to pick it up. It's just like, she's so scared that she literally does not want to recognize it at all and just basically refuses to the whole time. It's like, nope, I'm attracted to him, but that's it. Just, you know, he's hot, can't deny that, but nothing more than that. And he wears her down.
Mm-hmm.
Slowly but surely. He makes it pretty clear to her, like, multiple times that he's like, I want more. And I think that one of the things that I liked about the book so much was that he like, will not have sex with her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he'll do anything else, but he, like, basically pushes off having sex with her for a very long time because he's like, no, I don't want, it will hurt me to do it when you're not in it.
Yeah.
And it happens, like, multiple times in the book that, like, they go to, you know, do stuff and things are getting hot and heavy and she's like, yep, let's go to that next step. And he's like, no, you're not in this the way that I'm in it. And he's, like, pretty honest with her multiple times about that. And she's like, I can't give you that. Like, it's not that's, like, a boundary that I can't cross right now. And they just... I think she does it because she doesn't feel safe still. And the more that they do their outings and they go skinny dipping and they do bungee jumping and they do it, some of the things they do together too, which was so sweet that, like, he eventually starts doing some of the stuff with her. Especially, like, after the third act breakup, like, he starts doing the you know, daredevil stuff with her. And it's just when they get together finally and are, like, actually boyfriend and girlfriend, it's after, like, all of this conversation of just trying to make her feel safe and her being safe while also, like, just accepting the feelings that she has for him, like, yeah. Finally. And really the only thing that ends up pushing them apart is, for a while there, it's they were nervous about his daughter. But the real third act breakup comes in. He gets himself injured. And surprise, surprise. Oh my gosh. Wow. A guy flies off the handle in a bad moment because he now feels like he can't protect his family and the people he loves because he feels weak. So then he acts like a child and lashes out at his family, which sucks. And he throws a lot of, like, what he knows is her trauma back at her when he lashes out,
I had a lot of negative feelings. And I would say that scene for the third act breakup is what pushed it out of a 4 rating for me to recommend it immediate as a read, because it made me
because you hated
mad.
The third breakup so much.
I
think I would have been happy with the third breakup.
It felt very twisted hate.
Yeah.
It gave me twisted hate vibes, which, for those readers, that is a dark romance without any spoilers. It is a dark romance that I read, and their third act breakup scene also really pissed me off. Like, it rage baited me. Like, I was so angry afterwards.
Was furious.
I read this scene and I wanted to punch Burgess. Like, if someone said anything to me, I would if someone acted that way to me, it wouldn't have been a third act breakup. We would have just broken up and there would be no redemption in that scenario because he said horrible things to her.
Yep.
Like horrible, horrible things.
To me,
yeah.
I think that's just I think it justifies the amount of time and the amount of effort that it takes her to get in a place where she trusts him again. But he basically uses a lot of her trauma against her, which I think is why it's so sad. It wasn't like, just spewing mean shit at him. Or at her. It was like saying very specific things about stuff that she was insecure about related to all of the trauma with her kidnapping and stuff. Mm-hmm. And like throws that back at her. And he like calls her a coward at one point.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, dude. It just felt,
it didn't feel like
the more that we're talking about it, maybe it does. It feels out of character. Like it doesn't
because the
feel
whole
like...
time his whole goal was to like make her feel like fantastic in herself and brave and be able to do things on her own, and then he gets an injury and then is a complete asshat. Like,
and the other thing too is it's not like he does it to be like, I have to push her away so that she'll go and do things.
I feel like there was
and like not be with me.
There was a great option here that Tessa could have done, which was similar to the way Unfortunately Yours third act breakup plays out, which is one of my favorite contemporary romance books. And
he does talk a lot though, like he
says a lot of
he's in a deep depression. Yes,
he is, and there is many points in his internal dialogue of like she's saying this thing and it's like hitting him and then he's pushing back against it and pushing back against it. And I think this would have been a wonderful opportunity to have like an adult conversation and prove that like he is 37 and can act not like a child scenario. I don't know. I feel like there was such a wonderful opportunity to be able to write a similar third act breakup to Unfortunately Yours, which is like my favorite, where it's this slight miscommunication. They're like pushing against each other and then they like see each other's side in the conversation. So like, I don't know, the whole scene plays out of like, yes, this is happening, but then they realize that they're being silly in the same scene. And in this, she pretty much says, like, I came here to tell you I love you. So don't shut me out. So we'll get through this. So, like, she is already, like, realizes that he's acting out. And that's before he says anything, like, gnarly to her. Like, he's just like, you shouldn't have come here. I'm broken. Like, you're too young to be dealing with me in this kind of state. And she pretty much was like, I came here to tell you I love you. Her heart got stuck in her throat. Don't shut me out. We'll get through this. She started at her confession. His blue gaze deepened in color. That large chest starting to pulse up and down. He opened his mouth to speak and then snapped it shut. Like he thought about giving up this like push against her. And then he second guessed it and then like doubled down on just being a dick. And said, you think you're strong enough to get me through this? You're not a coward who walks away, right? His voice turned almost unnatural, like he was rushing to get the words out or he'd lose his nerve. But there's a Ziploc full of postcards in your purse that say different. That made me want to sucker punch him.
The thing that's, I just like, and then he like immediately regrets it.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally on the same exact page, he is like, I'm sorry, I'm so fucking sorry. And it feels, I don't know. It felt like definitely a 180. It felt really out of the blue, and then like the next chapter is a lot about like his depression that he's in post that fight. And I almost feel like it maybe would have been a little bit more believable if we had more of that depression not leading up to, but like when he's in the bed while she's
there.
coming to him, because I think that I understood it more. I understood him lashing out a little bit more after that next chapter. But it just was like, who is this dude all of a sudden? Let's just like...
He gets this one injury and then is a completely different person, then immediately regrets it, and then falls into this deep depression that he put himself in that scenario, like 1,000%. I don't know. It made me mad. I didn't like it. I didn't like the third act breakup. There are many different options that you can do for third act breakups. Obviously, miscommunication is a big one for contemporary romance.
Boo.
This was just two hard-headed people.
Would you have preferred miscommunication over this?
Probably.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
I guess it does go along that if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
So, maybe it would have been better if they just didn't talk.
Or if he was just like, I don't want you here. Like, even just like push her away.
He did say that.
But don't like just be mean. It felt like it was like mean to be mean and wasn't like in his character. Like the whole book, he's such a different person, and then for this 1-page scene, he's awful. And even at the beginning, he was just like, I just don't want you here. I don't want you to be a part of this. Like, he could have just been like, I'm done. I don't want to do this to you. Like, blah, blah, blah. And pushed her away and convinced her to leave instead of being mean.
Yeah, he gets like, and then he like has this conversation with her where he's like, oh, you think I'm going to have my college student girlfriend help me walk again after this surgery? You're dead wrong. I'd rather die out on the ice. Mm-hmm. And then like, he's literally walking within like 4 months, like 3 months?
Like a couple weeks. I thought
I mean, they have the wedding basically right after this.
Well, the wedding was 2 months after their,
so it's 2 months. He's up and walking again in 2 months. And like, granted, I'm sure he had to do a lot of fucking work to do that, but like, it's 2 months. I don't know. He gets like, he goes doomsday real fast.
Yeah.
And for her, it's such, I don't know, the longer that I think about it, I'm almost like, why did she? Because one of the things that they said when she's like, she takes him back is like, he shouldn't be punished for one bad moment. Like, she doesn't feel right ending their relationship for one bad moment that he had when he did absolutely everything right every other time.
I don't know. It's like, well, he only hit me once. Like, that's the energy it's giving.
That's what my brain that's what my brain went to when I read it, and I was like,
he only threw the bottle at the wall, not at me. Like, that's the energy it gives. And I'm like, okay. I don't know.
Although this is very different than throwing a bottle at a wall.
Yep.
I mean, emotional abuse is a very real thing, too, so.
That is correct. Yeah, it just felt very, I don't know. It felt manipulative. I think that's why I didn't like it. Which is fine. They end up, it's a contemporary romance, so in the end they end up together.
True. I will say for how much he fucked up, I was gonna say while I was reading this that, like, I was actually gonna text you about it. I was like, he's doing a lot of work to get her back. Mm-hmm. Like, they spend a decent chunk of time actually all focused on getting back together and him winning her back, which I loved, because I feel like a lot of the times it's like third act breakup, you just see them be sad, and then all of a sudden it's like literally the last chapter is like he does a big grand gesture and gets her back, and I'm like, that was boring. Like, you took all of the will they get back together and smushed it into one chapter and then an epilogue of them getting married, and I was like, okay, great. I liked that in this one he goes through like multiple chapters, like trying to get her back and trying different things and failing, and then like it felt like a lot more work, and maybe that's why I ended up giving it a 4, because by the time I got to that point, it's like, all right, he's really trying to do penance for how fucking terribly he fucked up. And then towards the end, he even ends up not being as focused on winning her back, but just getting to a point where he's enjoying life a little bit more the same way that she's been trying to, like, teach herself. So we both didn't love the third act breakup, but I do like, you know, I did like the amount of time that he had to spend getting her back. So at least from that time, there were a couple of bits that I thought were pretty funny. You have a great revenge dress scene and also conversation that she has with Sig. And Chloe's like, you're going to be able to go and put on your revenge dress. And Sig's like, what's that? And
I'm scared.
He's like, it's a dress you wear when you want someone to regret losing you. And Sig says, even more than he already does. I doubt that's possible. Which, you know, made Tallulah feel shitty. And I was like, Sig, shut up. This isn't her fault. It's his fault. He fucked up. He has to get her back and be good. And part of this conversation, too, is... So they're down there for this wedding, for Wells and Josephine's wedding. And they're best man and the maid of honor, which is hilarious. And the hotel, like, concierge is like, okay, like, here are the activities that you guys can go and do. And they're, like, kind of docking, and he's picking up on them being a little, like, awkward. And he's also, like, the wedding planner. And he goes, should I be made aware of a small rift in the wedding party? Chloe squared her shoulders. They dated, sort of. It was a hell of a lot more than dating, Burgess said, without taking his attention off Tallulah. It hardly matters now, Tallulah turned with a smile on their host. It's in the past. I see, Carlos trails off momentarily, then came back twice as enthused. Well, I can't wait to see how this ruins everything. And then briskly just walks away to go work on the other things that he has done. And that made me actually cackle. It's like, well, this is going to go terribly. I can't wait to see how terribly. Good.
Perfect. So happy I get to navigate this with you all. Love it.
I love being a wedding planner so much. They get to do, like, some really cool stuff in Costa Rica, and he goes through both trying to get her back and then realizing he gives up at one point. It's just like, I can't get her back. Like, she's made her decision. I'm not going to be able to get her back. And then just kind of focuses on, if I can't be with her, then I'm going to try to do my best to enjoy my life the way that it exists and the way that I have it. And that is kind of when she starts to realize, like, oh, I still love him, and I do actually want to get back together. And she spends so much time wanting to get back with him, and then just all of the stuff that he said replaying in her head, like, over and over and over again.
I think one of my favorite things about Costa Rica is that at some point, Wells, like, manipulates the two of them to, like, spend time together. So
all of the stuff with the wedding planner literally going and saying, like, oh yeah, you guys have activities you get to go do. And Wells is like, yeah, you two were the only ones invited on those activities, and they weren't for anyone else. And if you guys decided you weren't going to go, they were going to make up other excuses as to why you needed to go.
Yeah.
Totally not planned at all.
If someone else said that they wanted to go, they were just going to be like, nope, you're required.
They were going to be given a different time to go, which was so good.
Yeah. So Wells and Josephine were kind of, like, manipulating things, but it really was mostly Wells, which I also thought was funny.
She takes his sweatshirt down there with him and uses it, like, as a pillow. And this is also when we get the door frame scene. It's just a little hint of door frame, but we'll take whatever we can get. Without realizing it, Burgess had moved closer, positioning them both in the door frame, her back pressed to one side, his to another. He propped his forearm over her head, and leaned down. Yes! That's all I need, is just give me a door frame scene, you know? Basically what I thought was so cute is like she decides, oh, I do still love him. I want to get back together. And when she goes out like on the balcony to tell him, he's on the phone with Lissa, and she's like, "Did you tell her that you loved her?" And you only end up hearing like the one side of the conversation. I know, Liss. He massaged the center of his forehead. I tried. Tallulah abruptly stopped walking, hands pressed to her chest to keep her heart from leaping out. Of course I told her that I love her. Believe me, she knows. He listened. It's not that easy. There's not always a way to fix something when it breaks. Whatever his daughter said next caused him to tip his head back and exhale to the night sky. Yes, of course, I'll tell her you love her, but maybe she can tell me herself. Burgess went still, a beat passing before he turned his head. His eyes were guarded, and God, that tore her up. She didn't even want him to guard himself around her again, not ever. It's so cute. They basically get back together while he's on the phone with his daughter, and his daughter hears the whole thing, and then at the end they mention that you just hear screeching coming out of the phone of her being so excited they got back together.
It's so
just
cute.
So sweet. And they're like, we're gonna call you back. It's like, we'll call you back together. Like, oh, great.
Yeah. I love that Lissa is intertwined in the story the whole time. like there is not like she's always a factor, which is such a big part of his life. Like I like that she didn't get like left out. Like she was always a thought as like, how is this going to affect her? And so even the fact that she was like part of them getting back together was awesome.
And I think that she, like, it was also really important too, because at the one point where she blames Tallulah for like her parents not getting back together, like she feels bad. Like she feels like she's one of the reasons as well that they're not back together, which is not true. That poor girl.
Mm-hmm.
I also really appreciated that the ex-wife even owned up to a little bit of being like, I asked one too many times about your dad. I gave you the wrong idea. Like she does take like some ownership for the fact that this kid would even think that this woman who's engaged to someone else is still interested. Yeah. It's just like morbid curiosity, and she was not clear with her daughter when she was asking. It's just, I thought that was nice. 'Cause you know, crazy ex-wives. Mm-hmm. What a great trope that people do all the time.
Yeah, I like that she wasn't that way, and there was never point where... Like, there was a point where
they set her up like it was going to be like that, but then I really appreciated that it was like, nope, I already was judging her based on preconceived notions. I was like, damn it, Tessa, you got me. Damn, sorry.
Yeah, there was definitely a point where Tallulah was jealous of the ex-wife, unwarranted, mm-hmm. And it was definitely like in her own head, because there was at no point... She was just getting information from Lissa. So like, yeah, it kind of played in the back of her mind that she was like, well, maybe she does want to get back together. Like, I don't know her. I don't know her fiance. I don't know their relationship. I don't know things she says. But I think it was just they had a healthy co-parenting, which could be confusing to a 12-year-old in that scenario.
It would be. I mean, if you think your parents get along.
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't they be together?
Shouldn't have
they get along.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
They didn't get along before, but now they do, so it's fine. Like, they'll get back together.
Yeah. So I think, all in all, I'm not going to change my rating. I think I'm going to leave it where it is. Because I still, even with how harsh the third act breakup was, I still think I'd recommend it to someone at the end of the day. Like, that to me was not enough, because I think for me it redeems itself in how much he has to work to get her back. And then he also just, like, accepts her decision. He doesn't give up. He does accept her decision that, like, nope, she's just decided she doesn't want to be with me, and I will live my life the way that I can without her in it. So yeah, I think I am going to leave it at a 4. And then it's a soft 4, for spice.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
100% am staying with my rating. I would have probably given this a 4 if it wasn't for that scene.
If it had
One
ended
thing
with like a couple sentences sooner,
yeah, probably would have been
you
a 4.
probably would have given it a 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's fair.
Another thing that we should note is at the beginning of this episode we talked about trigger warnings. They were not these were our trigger warnings.
Yeah,
trigger warnings
we
were
wrote
not
them.
explicitly listed in this book. After reading it, we both realized that like they probably should have, and as two people who are Tessa Bailey stans, like we read
I
a
read anything this
majority
woman
of what
puts
she
out.
writes. I think I had one other book of hers that I didn't like.
Well, it's the same book that we didn't like.
Yes, there's one book we like very much were like, ma'am, please.
Secretly
but
Yours.
overall,
It's not good. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tessa. Please forgive me. It's not good.
However, so there's Secretly Yours and Unfortunately Yours, which I talked about a little
Unfortunately
earlier
Yours is
today.
great.
The
5
second
stars.
of that standalone series, Unfortunately Yours, was my number 1 pick of 2023 for my read. Like, and will live in my brain forever. I love that book to my core. It is so good.
For the
that
people who
being
love
said,
fantasy,
she-
this is the same year that she read ACOTAR. So
Yes.
she's rating it above ACOTAR as her favorite book.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has to be said.
It's fantastic. I loved it so much.
It's very good.
I have put like that, like Rachel's gateway drug book was Hook, Line, and Sinker, and that's what she recommends to people. My book is Unfortunately Yours. That is the first book I recommend to people.
Honestly, at this point, I'm perfectly fine with giving them Unfortunately Yours as the first book to go in. But
It's so
Hook,
good.
Line, and Sinker will always have a special place in my heart. But back to the wonderful point that we were making, which is I definitely have conflicted feelings about the fact that there were not any trigger warnings in this. And my reasoning is very specific because it's Tessa Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Tessa Bailey has, I don't want to pigeonhole anyone into a formula, but when you become known or people expect a certain type of experience out of your books, and then you, in some way, what I would consider pretty major step up in the terms of description and trauma, there should be something at the front to warn people. We're not talking about small stuff either, too. Like,
yeah, I think
this was
another
a pretty descriptive stalking, kidnapping, and being held captive for 2 days described on the page.
Yeah,
I
in
just
pretty
would've
vivid detail
wanted
of what she
trigger
was
warnings.
going through. I think another author that writes similar books is Allie Hazelwood, and there was a book she wrote recently, Not in Love, that has different concepts that she doesn't typically talk about, things that would be triggering to people. And at the very forefront of that book, she says to my readers, to people that read my books, this is outside the norm of the type of storyline that I give you. And like it is said, she writes pretty much at the forefront a letter. It's not necessarily like trigger warnings. These are all the things that are talked about. But she goes and writes a letter to the reader at the very front of the book saying that this is outside my normal lovey-dovey kind of thing. And in that book, there are some things that would be triggering to people. And she kind of touches on them in that letter to say, hey, if these are things that you wouldn't want to read about, I would recommend like you don't read my book kind of thing, which I think would have been useful for this one because it is so different. And not necessarily so different, but having that like that was kind of a darker element to this and is an element that I have read in in books that are considered dark romance. So
yeah,
for me,
you haven't read
a
a lot of Elle Kennedy yet. She is the one that wrote. She's written a ton of books, but she has two very, very popular series. And then she's just started a new series. But like I would say that a signature piece of the storylines that she writes is some sort of trauma to this scale. But every single one of her books has content warnings, like right at the beginning of it. And it doesn't have to be overly descriptive because, you know, we could have a whole conversation about whether trigger warnings are some things that people want and don't want. Some people really don't like how descriptive trigger warnings have gotten because they spoil a lot of things that happen in the book. So it's up to you. Like, at the end of the day, it is up to the person who is reading the book to do the research that they have to do to protect themselves. But I think that including it in the book as a page that you can choose not to read is what I would have wanted from this.
Yeah.
I just needed that one line, or even at the end of the acknowledgments, just making that bit of, hey, just a heads up, if this is something that's going to be triggering for you, like, I recognize that this is outside of my normal formula.
I really think Ali Hazelwood, like, hit the nail on the head with pivoting, because she wrote a book that was outside her normal, and she just put a little blurb. Like, it wasn't even a full content warning. It was just like, hey guys, this is what I typically write about. This book is a little different. It's going to touch on some more sensitive topics. And I just want you to know that as the reader going in, because I don't typically write stories like that. And that's all, like, I think as a reader you can really ask for, especially since Tessa Bailey is, like, a lovey-dovey writer. Like, you giggle at the things, like, she makes you feel butterflies, like, that kind of thing. Like, it is rom-com, like, to the max in her books, typically.
With spice.
Yeah, rom-com with spice. But it's that...
One of my favorite things is she puts it in her About the Author quote now. She's been dubbed the Michelangelo of dirty talk by Entertainment Weekly. Yeah. Yup. Writes with spice, spirit, swoon, and a guaranteed happily ever after. And now, please include trigger warnings, also, if you're going to do this again. And we're not saying this to
dissuade you from reading it.
We're not. Please don't make that the reason that you don't read it. We've told you what the trigger warnings are now, and we're going to put it in our Instagram posts and that kind of stuff, but when we went to write the episode, when we went to put the episode together, we felt like we needed to put them in there. And if we feel like we need to put it in there just to talk about it, then I think it's justified that it should have been a trigger warning at the start of the book.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So, still absolutely going to read everything Tessa Bailey writes from here until the end of time, because I love her books. But yeah, that's pretty much what we got for you. I love the book. Would recommend it. We really appreciate you guys listening.
Thank you so much, friends, for checking out our podcast. We really appreciate you experiencing our episode 2, The Au Pair Affair by Tessa Bailey. We hope you enjoyed your time here. You can find us at The Smut Peddlers on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Patreon, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.